Thanks, Stacy. Stacy's been telling me that she's been mispronouncing my last name for 5 years because she's from New York, and she's got to get that U in there. So anyway, Stacy, we know now it rhymes with similar. You're good. Okay. All right. I just want to say that I was excited. I was telling Ruth this morning that I was excited all week to see emails from Stacy going, oh my goodness, we've got to add another session. We've got to add another session because the response is just growing. And it's really because of your attendance that Summer Institute and Winter Institute works. And when we started this 5 years ago, it was truly an experiment. And we didn't know whether or not it was going to work, and we didn't know whether it would be continued, and we sure didn't know it was going to be institutionalized, which actually means it's going to be funded, which is very good news. And so, you know, we were looking for, the faculty was looking for quality, authentic, relevant professional development that came from us, that didn't come from someone else. And so that's the whole point of the Summer and Winter Institute. And that's the whole purpose of the Faculty Great Ideas for Teaching Center. So the Great Ideas for Teaching Center works because the faculty contribute, the faculty come up with ideas. It's their collaboration with great staff members like the TELS department, which is phenomenal. And we hope that it continues. And I'm grateful to say that Denise Woolsey is going to continue as the chair for the Great Ideas for Teaching Center. And it was Denise's creative idea that came up with the name for the Gift Center, Great Ideas for Teaching. So you'll see her in the fall. I also just want to say that the whole Gift Center works because people are so willing to collaborate at all levels of the college. And an example is when we were brainstorming what to do for the theme for this summer, and we were just all talking about our classrooms and how our students are changing and how we're seeing new students and we're seeing new challenges and new obstacles that our students face. And it's a reality check that we can't be naive about who our students are going to be because our culture is changing. And for example, in one of my classes, I had students from Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Turkey. And I had all kinds of types of students too. And so it really challenged me. So I was really sensitive to this issue. So as we were brainstorming in the Gift Center, we thought of the idea of having a panel. And as soon as I started calling people, again, I was just so impressed with their willingness to step in. And you know that it takes time to prepare, to present. It took time, didn't it? Oh, yes, it did, Scott. And they just all were willing. And so it's really a pleasure for me to acknowledge their great willingness to be here this morning and to share with you so much of what they know about students. And we wanted to get an assortment of perspectives, and I think we really did. And so we are lucky enough to have SandraAldrich with us, and she's the Veteran Services Coordinator, and she really knows the faces and challenges of veterans. And then we are lucky enough also to have Scott Nardo, who is the campus coordinator for Prescott Valley, and he also earlier had worked with a lot of veterans, so he has an even broader perspective now as the campus coordinator at PV. And then we're lucky enough also for a very busy man, Mark Shelley, to have said yes. And I mean, he just didn't even hesitate. And he is the dean of, and actually, isn't it NAU 2YC campus? That's what I'm seeing in print. That's not true? Okay, so Mark, tell me, who are you? NAU Yavapai Dean. So I'm really pleased to have them with us.
Thank you, Stacy and Jenny. Good morning. So I was putting in a little bit of time preparing for this, and I was looking for some some good graphic visuals to adequately represent my two fellow panelists, and so that's what you see up at the... You thought I wasn't really going to say that one. Excuse me. Okay, we're going to just go ahead and do a little bit of talking about the... For my portion of it, I decided that, a lot of what we're hearing in the media, a lot of what we're seeing in the classroom, a lot of what we're seeing just in our communities is challenges with respect to the economy and what people are facing financially right now. I have a background in English literature. So all of you folks that have taken business statistical analysis or teaching it or things like that, you're going to see a lot of real harmonious things with what I'm going to be doing with the analysis here, because my analysis usually is literary. But so my interpretation is going to be kind of one that really the statisticians out there will do, the economists will do, but really as an English lit major I did a lot of, and that's basically looking and perceiving and seeing patterns in things that may be helpful as food for thought for you to consider. And what all three of us are going to be presenting today is going to be really quite a variety of, and a lot to really chew on. So I think our goal for today is to really give you some things to start discussions within your departments, with your peers. And what I encourage is to have discussions, and this is one reason why I'm really happy that particularly Sandra and I are involved today, because we're from the student affairs side of the house. And it's fun to mix it up with the faculty and collaborate on things and continue the dialogue between, two kinds of very different perspectives in the college. Okay, so here comes my economic analysis. Okay. So housing and most other markets I'm perceiving are down. Everybody can participate in this too. Now, unemployment rates are generally up, okay? Feelings of economic stability are down, and anxiety then as a result. There you go. Okay, so that's my analysis of the economy. And so this is the background. I didn't need to do a lot of research on that because we really have been bombarded with that in the media from all different directions. So these are just things that we're dealing with. We know our students are dealing with, and we as employees, maybe we're feeling underemployed. So this is not just unique to our students. This is in our families. This is in our community. So, but we're going to be focusing on the student aspect of it today. Okay, now I'm going to really get statistical on you. Feel like our vice president with the charts and graphs that he was bringing the other day. So there's a few different lines on this chart, and the little legend over the right says, basically that I'm going to be starting from the top here. This is our total head count enrollment as of the census day over the last 4 years in the fall term. What we see in the first is 8,509, and it goes up in fall of 07 to 9,063. Comes down just a few head count in fall of 08, and then we see a little bit more of a drop in fall of 09. So in this academic year, our fall head count was 8,276 students. The second line, which represents the majority of that head count. Now, head count is one way of quantifying what we are doing at the college. What we see in the second line is those are part-time students. So by and large, the majority of our head count is part-time students. Okay? What we see, though, also that even that little bit steeper decline, sorry about this, that little steeper decline right here than you saw at the total head count means that this drop in our part-time student load, or part-time student numbers, are actually the primary motivator in the overall decline of our head count. Okay, so that's an important thing. The third line is footsie. We're going to talk about that last. The bottom line, though, gosh, I keep hitting the wrong button. Sorry about that. The bottom line is the blue line, and what we actually see is a trend there in our full-time student headcount, and that's actually coming up. That's an interesting thing. I've heard Adrienne Tabar kind of presenting just general numbers like this, and she says, you know, that's very good for the college. It's very good to have, first of all, just as a business organization, we're having the opportunity to impact students at a higher level because they're making a higher commitment to full-time student enrollment now than they have in the past. Oh, hi, Adrienne. Didn't know you were here. And so that's a very good thing. The decrease in part-time students, I think, can be partly attributed to, at least in part, to the economic challenges that we're facing. Because if you think about it, a student who can only attend school part-time has a lot of other commitments outside of their school environment. So you're talking about family obligations. You're talking about maybe they're working 1 or 2 or 3 different jobs outside of school. And so when we see like the reduction, when did the housing market start to plunge? 2007. And so we're starting to see in our numbers, we started declining right after that in our overall head count. That's an interesting thing. Our banner implementation, which resulted in some processes and things that we had to smooth out and make things smoother for students, that didn't occur until fall of 2009. So that, you know, that's the far right end of that trend, but the trend didn't begin there. So I think that's important to realize. Our students are struggling. What we see in this chart is students having to make a decision between, are they going to go to school or are they going to go to work? Try to feed the mouths around their table. Are they going to go to school? And if they are going to go to school, they need to make a higher commitment to that. We see that in full-time numbers coming up. Students feel a greater sense of urgency to complete their training and get out there and go to work. They feel a greater sense of urgency to get the job done, and so they're taking more credits per student. This is a similar patterns that we see for the spring census days. You see a little bit higher numbers in the spring, which was kind of surprising to me. I always anticipated that it would be higher numbers in the fall. But if we superimpose both of them, we see that fall numbers are generally at a particular place, and then they go up for spring, and then they come back around the fall levels, and they go up, so it's a zigzag thing. Interestingly, though, even with the crazy zigzags that our student headcount numbers do at the top of this list, our full-time numbers have a much more gradual increase. So that's an interesting thing to point out. Our students are making a higher commitment to going to school, the students that we retain. The students that we're not retaining are the students that have to work, are the students that are not being able to carve out the time to pursue those higher educational pursuits. Okay, now let's look at what students are doing with the financial aid. As of May 10th, so this is a comparison chart showing just at May 10th of each academic year. May 10th in 2008-09, we had 1,754 FAFSA applications, students asking for federal aid to go to school. That number went up. In 2009-10, as of May 10th, we had 2,267. And then by this year, just a few days ago, 3,674. So we're seeing a great increase. I mean, this is a really significant increase in the number of financial aid applications we get each year. And this year is, it's really big. So this is what the difference looks like. Last year, we had 513 more applications by May 10th than we did in the prior year. This year, we have 1,407 more financial aid applications, just the FAFSA application, than we did in the previous year. That says something. Okay, so here's the comparison with the total applications that we received in 2008-09 and in then 2009-10, which we're almost done accepting applications in. In 2008-09, we had 4,534 federal aid applications. This is not everybody who's eligible. This is people who are asking to be considered. And then in 2009-10, as of when I got the numbers I think it was yesterday that I got this number from Vicki Gill, 6,483. And we're not done collecting those applications yet because we still accept them through June 30th. Pretty significant increase. Very significant increase. So if we're taking that May 10th number as an indicator of what we're going to see for the total for the year, where do you think our blue line is going to be on the right side for the end of this academic year? These numbers, you know, it's easy to say, yeah, okay, well, I can see a trend there, but you show this to a financial aid advisor and just watch their eyes go, oh my gosh. They're like, oh man, we're barely seeing the light of day already. They're working. This is just an indicator. This is the students are asking for help. So here we see, in 2009-10, we have 1,949, almost 2,000 more applications versus last year. And we're still not done. We still have till June 30th. And I think, I had a little note at the bottom of this. May 10th is roughly 24% of the way through the 18-month financial aid cycle for a given year. It's an 18-month cycle. It starts January 1st when we start accepting financial aid applications, and it goes through that whole calendar year and then stops June 30th of the following year. Okay. So what we see then is by May 10th, we're at about 24% of the way through, and so we see a little bit of a front loading on the number of applications that we get. So 24% of the way temporally through the academic, or through that 18 months, we have in 08-09, we had 39% of our total applications, and 35% of our total applications by May 10th last year. So if we're comparable this year, and we're looking at 35 to 39% of our total by May 10th, okay, math teachers, where's our number going to be? Our total, it's going to be like above 10,000. How many students do we have unduplicated head count at this school? Roughly 14,000. So I'm wondering where this is going to be. Significant numbers of our students are asking for help. Spending a lot of time on this, sorry to do that, but I think there's a lot to be learned right here. Some inferences. Greater FAFSA to student ratio, because our head count is dropping, but the cry for help is increasing. Okay? So there's a greater FAFSA to student ratio, indicates at a minimum a greater sense of need. People are feeling like they need help, and they're overcoming those little barriers that prevent them from asking for help. So that tells you a little bit about how much. Now, part of those barriers might be lessened by the fact that you know, the federal government and there's a big push to encourage people to pursue education and apply for help. But part of that is also, I think, due mostly to the sense that people are just really feeling the pinch. They're looking at the difference between their expenses and their resources, and they're saying, whoa, especially if I'm going to get some training to increase my ability to get sustainable, I'm going to need some help getting there. The increase in full-time versus part-time, full-time, part-time ratio, so full-time versus part-time, versus the flat growth overall. Actually, the head count is coming down, but the full-time is coming up, right? That indicates a greater commitment to completing your training quickly. So again, we're in a hurry. We want to get the job done. We want to go to work. We have a greater sense of urgency. From another perspective. So we've talked a little bit about the financial aid numbers. As an academic advisor, I like to approach helping a student determine what program of study they're going to pursue from the perspective of what do you want to do when you grow up? You know, what is the career that you want to shoot for? Then we can work back from that goal and design a program to get you there. Okay? So option A is we encourage students, find the best career fit for you. We have career services. We have Michael Brown and Joya Goodrum, who are career counselors. We have online services and resources for students to figure out what the best career fit is going to be for them. Option B is what we're seeing a little bit more of nowadays, and I think we can expect to see that increase too. Students are going to be coming to school not with the primary motivation of figuring out what the best career objective is going to be, but because they're looking for a job, any job. I see so many people each week that are asking for training in healthcare, because that's one of the industries that everybody feels comfortable about. Okay? Things are getting a little bit tighter as far as nursing jobs in this area, but there are still some healthcare jobs out there, and we're still training the people to enter that area. But not necessarily everybody's going to be a good fit for that particular major. Okay, so if you're going to school and you think, you know, yeah, I'm really great at literary criticism, but all the jobs are in welding. I'm going to go get some welding training. So what's that mean for you? We'll talk about that in just a minute. Retention and persistence. Economic factors are often cited as a major challenge to persistence to educational goal attainment. Economic factors. When we did some years ago at Yavapai College, we did a study, hired a marketing or a research firm called SandraAldrich, and this study indicated by and large the people that were not persisting were citing financial reasons for not persisting. Interestingly enough, our third bullet down says economic factors are one of the main reasons people go to college. So they're coming to college because they're challenged financially. But because they're challenged financially, they can't complete. Tough situation for our students to be in. Economic stressors often either trigger or aggravate other stressors that will affect their goal attainment. We've got to be perceptive to this challenge in our students. We have to think about and get this discussions happening in your departments, in student affairs, as well as in the instructional side of the house. What are we going to do to help students through this? What are we going to do to make sure that they have the best chances of succeeding to the attainment of their educational goal? Here are a few strategies. Cross-training. We need to know what resources are available at Yavapai College to help our students with. So there are, there's some things that we can do, faculty can do to maybe get familiar with some of the services and things that are happening on the student affairs side of the house. And we in student affairs have some learning to do to figure out what are faculty's capabilities to assist students. What's expected of a faculty person's office hour time? You know, are students being encouraged to go there and talk to their instructors? I, as an academic advisor, often point students in the direction of their faculty to talk about things that they're bringing up in my office because they really haven't started the conversation yet. They're just afraid to. They're afraid they're afraid to find out where they really are sometimes. So we need to cross-train. We need to get the conversations happening between these two different sides of the house. Know and encourage sound financial principles. Now, it's not often that a faculty, I imagine, is going to have a chance to really talk about financial principles with a student. But these are the challenges that they're facing. You know, so if an opportunity presents itself and a student is saying, yeah, I got to go get another credit card today. I've got 14 already, and they're all maxed out. If they're saying that to you, give them a little reality check. Okay? What are some other options? Hey, you know what? Go talk to somebody in our financial aid office. They might have some better options for you. Federal student loan is a lot better than a credit card kind of debt. Early academic alert system. How many of you have actually used the early academic alert system? This is great. Excellent. I don't get very many referrals out in PV. I know it's being used though. They come through Tanya Sheldall and she filters them out to the academic advisors. We like to help students at the time that they really need it. So if you haven't begun to use our early academic alert system, there's a little link in your portal called SAGE/early academic alert, I think. The SAGE system, and we can provide training for you if you haven't used it before. But it's a really great way for you to call in the troops and help a student who might be struggling in your class as early on as possible in the term. Because a lot of our students are going to be able to persist through to census day, but some of them won't. And so those census day figures that I was citing earlier, they're not all the numbers. A lot of students drop out before that time. So maybe we can help them. Maybe we can help them to honor the financial commitment and the investment that they've made in coming to school and complete something. This early academic alert system is one way to bridge that gap between the two sides of Yavapai College to come into direct contact with students. We need to keep that bridge strong. Asking questions. Asking questions among ourselves. What does this mean for the individual student in your classroom? What does this mean for you as an instructor or staff member? What does this mean for your department or division? This morning, these talks that we three are giving you today are meant to spark a little discussion. So if you come away with nothing else today, come away, please, with a willingness and a dedication to start those kinds of discussions. Because I can't tell you all the answers right now, but together we can come up with something. Okay, thank you very much. I'll hand it over to Sandra.
I'm not used to using a microphone. Usually I just shout and everyone hears me. My name is SandraAldrich. I'm the Veteran Services Coordinator for Yavapai College. And I'm here to talk to you today about some of the challenges and issues that our veterans are facing returning from military service and trying to get back into civilian life. At some point in our adult life, we all ask the question, how may I serve? For most of you in this room, the answer came back, become a teacher. For most of the men and women that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, the answer came back, serve your country. And so they joined the military. Now that their service is done, they're asking that question again and coming up with different answers. So maybe they want to be a paramedic or a firefighter, a nurse, a teacher, any number of things. And so they come to Yavapai College for the training and the new knowledge that they need in order to come into this new career and serve in a different way. But as most of you probably have observed, the 25-year-old military veteran sitting in your classroom is very different than the 25-year-old who's never served in the military. In fact, the military veteran may not even recognize themselves anymore. And so they're here not just for an education in some particular field, but also to figure out, who am I now? You know, what is my life about now? But they face a lot of challenges in trying to do that. I'm not a veteran myself. I've never served in combat. I've never been near a war. So what I'll talk to you about today is what I know from actually speaking to the men and women who have served. And for anyone here who is a military veteran, if I don't represent your experience, I apologize for that. I'm just speaking from what I know and hoping that what I have to tell you is something that you can use in your teaching situations to help our students. I know that for some people, the military veteran can be a very difficult person to have in the classroom for a variety of reasons. But I can assure you that every veteran I've spoken to, and I speak to many, if not all of them, who come to school here and are getting benefits, they're here because they want to change their lives. They know they have to change their lives in order to come back into civilian life and to be successful and to offer their talents to the community, to their families, and so on. They've honored us by coming to Yavapai College. That's my feeling. And so I'd like to share with you a little bit about what I know of their experience in the military and the kinds of challenges that they face now that they're out. Imagine what you were like at 18 years old. Now, looking back on the perspective that we have now, we know that we were pretty naive and pretty impressionable. But if you remember what it was really like to be 18 years old, you thought you knew everything. Your parents, your elders, your teachers, they were out of touch, they were old-fashioned, they were downright ignorant. So let's assume that you've decided you want to do military service and you go to talk to a recruiter. And they're going to tell you everything that the military will offer you. You can train in whatever field you want. You'll get instant respect because you're in the military, and you'll have all these benefits when you get out. What they don't tell you is what basic training will do to you. They don't tell you what it's like to be in combat, and they don't tell you how much you're going to have to fight for those benefits once you do get out. So you make the decision to join, and you're signing a contract maybe for the first time in your life. You go through basic training, you go through your military training in your particular field. You may go through combat. So how do you feel when you get out? After you know the realities, after you're older and wiser. You probably feel somewhat disillusioned. You might feel deceived. You probably feel frustrated. You feel like you've lost time in your own life, certainly in your education. Your peers are way ahead of you, and your progress may seem positively slow by comparison. Some people actually join the military because they don't know what else to do. They might have even been told that they're not college material. So their military service is the first time that they've really felt successful, that they've learned a job and done it and been successful at it. But they don't recognize the value of some of the things they've learned when they come back into civilian life. You know, that kind of commitment and focus and dedication, they may not understand just how valuable that is. All they see is, I'm so far behind. I've been left behind. Also, in the military, pretty much everything is structured. They tell you when to get up in the morning. They tell you what uniform to wear. They tell you what job to do, where to eat, when to eat, what to eat, who to eat with, and when to go to sleep at night. And suddenly you're thrown back in civilian life, and there's all these decisions to be made. How do you go about doing that? You know, part of the job, I think, of them coming to school and interacting with faculty is to learn how to make decisions. You know, it's a very different life and a very different world. Combine that with some of the things that Scott was talking about. You've come back to an economic situation that's positively dismal. You probably aren't going to get a job, certainly not to the level that you should based on your training. So you come back to school for a lot of different reasons. The other thing I think that we have to keep in mind is that it's hard to go from being an expert in your field, which many people are in the military, to being, you know, a student again, to being at the bottom and having to learn things. It's hard to be in the classroom with other people your age or 18-year-olds because you know a life that's very different than they've had, than they've experienced, and there are often feelings associated with that. I think that being in the military these days is probably very different than it was in the past. It's really common for people to be deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan 2, 3, even 4 times. Once you're out, you're in the reserves for a period of time, and you can still be recalled, and many people are. If you join the National Guard, you will probably be sent to active duty. Some of the students that are sitting in your classroom already know when they're going back. They may have been once, and in a few years they know they're going back again. So they only have so much time to get this education in. This kind of, you know, constant deployment back and forth has a really disruptive effect on their personal lives. There's a higher rate of divorce among military persons than the general population. Domestic violence, drug abuse, suicide. Also, some of our students even are dealing with being arrested and incarcerated because of some of the issues that they bring back, because of this inability to really adjust. They end up with a record that follows them for the rest of their lives. So those are all some things that they're dealing with. It's not uncommon for an older veteran, 30, 40, even 50 years old, if they have specialized training, to be recalled to duty. And I've had that happen to a number of my students. You can imagine they begin to feel more comfortable in the military and in a combat situation than they do right here at home with their own families and their own communities. They've actually had young students wish that they would get called back again because they feel so uncomfortable here and they feel so useless. They just don't know what to do. And figuring that out takes time. And you know, for those of you in here who are my age, you understand a little bit more about time and perspective and patience. But that's not necessarily true for everyone. They may not have actually had enough life experience to understand that this is a process you go through and this will take time. When military persons get out, they go through a lot of medical testing, questioning, and so forth. The military tries to figure out what sorts of things they've been exposed to and what kinds of injuries and so on that they might have. But once they're discharged, you can't make them go back for treatment. I read a statistic that said that between 2002 and 2008, 50,000 returning vets were diagnosed with PTSD. And less than 10% went for the suggested 10 to 12 week sessions over 10 to 12 sessions over a 4-month period. Those are the students who are sitting in your classrooms. They may not reveal to you what's going on with them. You know, in the military, you're just taught to not complain, to not ask for help, to suck it up, to get the job done. And although the VA will tell them there's help available, there's still that military culture that it's looked down upon to ask for help. So sometimes it's really important to open that conversation with the student, and it doesn't take much. It's really just, you know, connecting with them somehow. If they perceive that you are interested and that they can trust you, then they'll share some things with you that I think will help in terms of your being able to open them up to what you have to teach them. I just want to talk a little bit about some of the types of injuries that people are coming back with. I know if you look around campus, you don't see a lot of people who are missing limbs or who appear to be physically disabled, but a large percentage of our military veterans here on campus have some sort of disability. One really common one is TBI, traumatic brain injury, and it can be very deceiving because, you know, it can be caused by an actual blow to the head or a bullet or just being in proximity to an explosion can cause this. And don't assume that the female veterans are not subjected to this because even though they don't serve in combat roles, they are there as support personnel. And so they're exposed to the same kinds of things that any military person is exposed to. So TBI is something that disrupts brain function. It could be mild and temporary, it could be severe and permanent. There are physical symptoms that might be associated with it, but there are also personality and behavioral changes. If anyone's ever had a concussion, you know, that's perhaps a mild form of it. I know I had a concussion once and I didn't know it for 3 days until other people started telling me, asking me if something was wrong. Because you don't necessarily recognize that something's off, that something's changed. Some of the symptoms that these people might experience, as I said, physically, you know, headache, dizziness, fatigue, change in sleep patterns, insomnia, a ringing in the ears. Those are physical symptoms. You could understand how if somebody's sitting there with a massive headache and ringing in their ears, they might not look too interested in your classroom. But there are also other symptoms that can be associated with this, like inability to concentrate, poor memory skills, as well as, you know, depression, which you can understand how that might happen. So the student sitting in the back of your classroom who looks for all the world like he or she just couldn't care less about what you're talking about may be experiencing something very different than what you perceive. Another real common injury, if you will, has been known by different names over time. Soldier's heart, shell shock, battle fatigue, post-Vietnam syndrome. In World War I, the therapy for shell shock was execution, so that the other troops wouldn't look at this and lose morale. So hopefully we've become a little bit more compassionate, but I don't know if we're really much better at solving the problem. Some of the symptoms of PTSD, well, some of them you're probably familiar with. If anyone's old enough to remember Vietnam, you remember the talk about flashbacks, re-experiencing the event. PTSD can happen to anybody as a result of a traumatic event. So if you're in a severe car accident, a natural disaster, some kind of physical abuse, it can happen to anybody. Our military veterans are experiencing it as a result of what's happened to them or what they have seen in combat. They probably felt that their own lives were endangered, and they've seen things that they just can't cope with. So some of the symptoms, like I said, flashbacks, you know, that might be something that you've heard about before and that you're familiar with. Some of the symptoms are really similar to traumatic brain injury. So physical symptoms, insomnia, inability to sleep, inability to concentrate, agitation, just being irritable. But something that you may not realize is that it can also lead to just a kind of not wanting to participate in the day-to-day activities of life, not wanting to be around other people. A kind of isolation sets in. They have the feeling that they're not going to live out their lives. They're not going to get married. They're not going to finish school. They're not going to have a family. And so, again, students sitting in your classroom may be experiencing something very different than what you perceive. And any kind of stress can bring these symptoms on and intensify them. And I can tell you, as someone who also goes to school here, I take one class a semester and I have a full-time job, and school is stressful. It's very stressful. I've had students walk into Building 1 on a busy day, visibly shaking, because they couldn't take being in a crowd, being around all these people, being around this noise, looking around wondering, you know, who should I go to for help? So the fact that they've made it into your classroom is an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. You know, I can get them through the front door. I can help them with their benefits. I can show them how they can use the resources that they have. But you have the advantage of seeing them day in and day out and seeing their experiences as a result of the stress of going to school and so on. Just opening up a conversation with them can be really meaningful to them. If they don't learn anything else in your classroom, but they learn that there are people out there who care and people who can help them, then that's a major accomplishment and a significant change in their life and a significant step towards the transition back to civilian life. One of the other injuries that's really common is orthopedic injuries, so injuries to the spine or the limbs. And it's, again, very deceiving. I mean, you know, I've talked to some students for a year before I knew that they still had a bullet embedded near their spine, or they had a piece of shrapnel that couldn't be removed. And they tell me that on really cold days they can feel that because the metal gets colder than the surrounding tissue. Anybody who's got any kind of chronic pain, I think, can understand that this isn't going to get better for them. Again, they might be sitting in your classroom. I did an orientation last night. I had 3 vets in that orientation. Not one of them could sit through the whole thing without getting up and moving around. They all had some kind of injury. And so if you have that in your classroom, I understand that it can be very disruptive, but they may be in severe pain. They may just not be able to sit for long periods of time. And there may be nothing that can be done about it. You know, they may not be able to have surgery or have that corrected. It's something they have to live with. And one of the last things I want to talk about is really just the whole bureaucracy of what they've had to deal with. You know, I read a statistic the other day that on average a veteran applying for disability or just trying to get a disability rating with the VA fills out 22 separate forms just to get the process started. One of the vets in my orientation last night took him 16 years to get the VA to approve his disability and get back pay for all of that time. It is not an easy process. And then they come to Yavapai College and we throw more forms at them and we have more bureaucracy. You know, financial aid, I know my office has its own share of forms. You have forms to fill out in your classroom and, you know, if they seem frustrated with that and impatient, it's because they are. And I just tell them, you know, it's unfortunately the price of admission. If you want to get these things, this is what you're going to have to go through, and we can help you out with it. But it is very, very frustrating for them. And just a few closing remarks. At a recent conference, my counterparts at ASU said that they encourage their faculty to actually ask in the classroom, who is a veteran? Just so that you open that connection, so that if you feel like you want to thank them for their service, you can certainly do that. But just to have an
done over a dozen observations this semester, and so I get to sit in the back of the classroom. So I thought one of the things I'd like to share with you is my view from the back of the classroom and what I see. When I'm up teaching, I don't see the things that I see when I go observe and sit in the back. One of the things I see is students texting, and that's no news to any of us, right? Okay, but this is what I'm coming to understand, and this week there were two examples this week that really drove this home. I'm proposing that texting is ousting computing. That our students' computing skills are decreasing as their texting skills are increasing because texting is replacing computing as the main avenue of communication. Let me give you two examples. We were trying to organize a class gathering for one of my smaller classes, and we had left phone messages. Of course, the phone rings, it goes to voicemail. We'd sent emails. So my administrative assistant decided she was going to text the members of the class to get answers back for this event. She texted them. Within 60 seconds, everybody had replied. I'm like, whoa! Okay, so there's a shift, and there's some implication to the shift. The other example is we just had a division retreat out at Goldwater Lake, and Suzanne Waldenberger gave us a scavenger hunt, and the scavenger hunt was done on the text messages. You get your clue, and you'd type in hint, and tell you if you're right or wrong, and give your next clue. Was all done. We even took a picture of ourselves and emailed it in to prove it that we'd done a certain thing. All on the cell phone, all using text messaging. And so this is a shift that I'm seeing. And one of the questions I have as an instructor is, okay, how do I incorporate this? What do I do with it? And so this raises a quandary about delivery systems. And here again, I'm trying to describe and not advocate. I know some of us are big advocates of online, and we're going to have a workshop on hybrid courses and that kind of thing. But if it's true that texting is ousting computing, then maybe our assumptions about the level of students' computer skills may be an error, or we may need to readjust those a little bit. They know how to do Facebook, because that's the other way. If you want to get to your students, just go on Facebook and type in their name, and you'll find most of them. And I know somebody says, did you send me an email? No, but I sent it to your Facebook account. Didn't you look at it? No, I didn't. But I do have a Facebook account, okay? So what are our assumptions? What do we do about delivery methods? Online is certainly convenient, and some of our students, especially in our county, as dispersed as it is, they take advantage of that. But we were just talking before the session here of different ways to try to get our students engaged, even to log in on the computer. I had a student appeal, came in and he says, well, I logged on for 2 weeks at the beginning of the semester. I'm just going to wait until the end of the semester to do all my assignments. Okay? And that's not an unusual perspective of what an online class means. So a lot of the workshops and stuff that we're going to go to in the next few days, we really need to be raising some of these questions. How do we engage people? What kind of orientation do students need? What kind of skills can we assume or not assume? What kind of training do we provide them? And then there's the whole idea of what kind of media do we use? Do we use pictures, videos? I use a lot of videos in my class, but what I'm finding is that students can't reflect on those videos. They watch them as entertainment. They can't watch them critically, and so I spend a lot of time saying, okay, this is just isn't a movie. Let's look at what social statement this movie is saying or what ethical statement this movie is making. Whole thing about do we use Kindle, Nook, which is Barnes & Noble's Kindle? Do we go with digital print or do we go paper print? One of the things that we've been looking at our divisions, I don't know if others of you seen, they're coming out with more and more magazine format textbooks. This is Nicole's, I stole it from her. Think Psychology. The upside to this is we talked about the economy. She's getting these used for $46.50. So that's like half or a third of what a real, normal psychology textbook would be. My concern, and we don't have enough experience to say, but when you look through this, it looks like a magazine. Different size print, different colors. These even look like full-page ads. My question is, are our students going to read them like magazines? Like this, you know, till you find something that grabs you? Is that how they're going to read these? I don't know. These are issues. These are part of the changing student population we're dealing with and questions that we need to explore and find some answers for. Laptops. This is one of my favorite experiences. As I go observe classes and sit in the back, students have their laptops up. If you think they're taking notes, you are sadly mistaken. I might even suggest you're a little bit delusional. Okay? They are doing everything else but taking notes. They're watching music videos. They are on their Facebook. They're texting, they're IMing people in the class or outside of class. They're doing sports. They're looking up sports scores. I've seen it all this semester. And so what do you do with laptops? You know, you say, okay, it's okay to have your laptop open. Do you try to incorporate laptop exercises in the class? Do you say, put them down, you're not going to need your laptops? What do we do? The other thing I've noticed is that students aren't taking notes. I mean, I've gone into some of the instructors and they're giving these wonderful things. I'm taking notes because the instructors are giving such good stuff. And 80–90% of the students are just sitting there looking at the instructor. Okay? And so what's going on here is, do we post everything on PowerPoint so they don't feel like they need to? I do that in my classes. I'm guilty. You know? I say, well, you can get this after class on Blackboard. Is that helping them learn? Is that helping them reinforce? I don't have any answers. Just got lots of questions today. The other thing I've run into personally in the classes that I've taught this semester is a lot of people are moving. Anybody else noticing that? A lot of people are coming up and say, well, I'm going to miss this next week because I'm looking for an apartment, or I'm moving and I have to be there when the movers come. More and more of that. Let me speculate. People are changing jobs. Several people have said, I'm changing jobs. I have to move. There's economic woes, can't afford my rent. Several people have come and said, house is being foreclosed. I have to move. I've got to get out. So that's one reason for moving that I've seen this semester. Family restructuring. And obviously things like divorce restructures the family, parents split up, they have to move. But there's some other restructuring going on. Several of my students this semester said, my dad had to take another job. My family is moving. I'm living at home, but my family is moving down to Phoenix. And so I need to find a place to stay here. I need to move here. So I think the economy is restructuring our jobs. Now the next 2 points are could be a little controversial. They're not value judgments, they're descriptive, but I'm not going to worry about walking on eggshells. There's an increasing number of our students, younger students, under 25, whose neural connections aren't made. They fall in love in 2 or 3 days, and they move in with each other. Okay? That is happening very frequently. Well, what happens is you get this cycle of, we're living together, we're not. We're living together, we're not. We're breaking up, now we're back together. I've seen this from a number of students this semester. And then those students then bring all that baggage into the classroom, and it stands in the way of their learning. A lot of single parents. In each of the classes that I taught, I had a young mother who came, unmarried young mother who came up and says, I'm pregnant. And I don't really know how to deal with this. How do I deal with this? What am I going to do? And that often involves moving. It involves, do I stay with this guy that got me pregnant, or do I not stay with this guy? I don't think he's going to be a good father, but what do I do? And that's a real issue facing our students. And in my observation in the last 5 years or so, it's either, in a lot of these things, maybe they aren't happening more, but they're more open. Students are more open about these issues. I'm not sure which. Increasing personal struggles. Drug abuse. I had several students over the last few semesters who were in and out of rehab during the semester. I'm not going to be here the next week. I have to go to detox. Okay? And so what do you do? Do you count them absent? Do you not count them absent? Do you kick them out of the class? Do you let them stay in the class? What do you do with these students? Returning vets. Sandra talked about a lot of them. This is pretty close to my heart now. My son is on an aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. My son-in-law just got back from Afghanistan, is now doing special forces training. And we're having 6,000 of these vets returning. And one of the things I really liked about, I had the advantage of knowing what these guys were going to say before I did it. But one of the things I really liked, what she said, was about making connections. And I've really tried to do that this semester, and I found that it makes a difference. Interesting anecdote. I was having dinner this weekend with some of the students that completed a class with me, and one of them is a vet. He's recovering with PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, if some of you didn't know that. We throw around this lingo. But my wife came down this weekend, and she hadn't met him, and we were talking, and she thanked him for his service and talked about Ben, my son, being in the Navy, and started talking about what his experiences were. He says, now about that group process we did the other week. And he looked me in the eye and said, I'm intentionally changing the subject. I mean, he couldn't even discuss his experiences. And so I don't think that's really uncommon. I've been surprised in the last few years how many reports of spousal abuse, parental abuse, significant other abuse that the students have confessed. I don't know if that's the right word, but you know they've shared, and that's a bit disturbing. As Sandra said, post-traumatic stress can happen not only because you're in combat, but because you've experienced any kind of traumatic event, and I think we're seeing more of our students being traumatized. Eating disorders. Anybody else run across students with eating disorders? The last 3 semesters, I've had at least one student who has shared with me at one point in this semester that they've had an eating disorder. I had one student this semester come say, where do I go for help with this eating disorder? I'm not sure, like I said, it's any more frequent than it used to be, but certainly I'm hearing about it more. And I'm certainly not an expert at eating disorders. When they ask me, you know, where can I go? Well, I know of one place in Wickenburg that they can go, but that's it. I mean, I need some help. I need some resources or people who I can connect students with who can get the kind of help that they're asking for. Scott touched on this, personal debts, that 14th credit card. Students' loans, credit cards, health care costs, transportation, I can't come to class because my car broke down and I don't have enough money to fix it. Okay, so these are some of the burdens that our students are facing. I remember, anybody remember your first credit card? Anybody get a student credit card? Back in the mid-'70s, you know, they gave you like $100 on your credit card, yeah. And they figure, well, if you spend $100. Now, the credit limits are astronomical. They're astronomical. Yeah, the rates are too. But students don't look at the rates. They need the money now to fix their car, to buy their iPod or whatever. Child care has become an increasing issue. I'm finding in my classes a lot of single parents. And they'll call me or email and says, you know, my child's sick. I can't find anybody to take care of my child. Can't be at class today. And we've got the Family Enrichment Center here, and we do a great job with that, but there's limited spaces in that. So another issue that I've seen students having. Parental involvement. Last couple of semesters have dealt with several cases of different levels on the spectrum of parental involvement. There are some of our students who've come to me and say, my parents are against me coming to college. They say, go get a real job. Go make some money. Reflection of the economy partially the culture, family culture that they've grown up with. Some parents are totally apathetic. I'm not, if you want to go to college, that's fine. I don't have any money to help you. And then we have a few helicopter parents. So I love this. I did this. So here, watch. Here it comes. Okay. And we've actually dealt with, I know I've dealt with some of you in this room on some cases of helicopter parents calling, want to know what my student's doing. Well, they're trying to be independent, and they don't want mom and dad knowing what they're doing, and mom and dad feel they still have a right to know. Legally at 18, they're adults. Neurologically, psychologically, they're not adults. Parents know that. And so these students are caught in this never land of, you know, what do I do with my parents? How do I deal with my parents? So, in summary, we have many types of students, many kind of not new issues, but issues that are being accentuated, priorities that are being reordered. And one of the things we talked about when we met is there are no one-size-fits-all answers to these students' issues. And so we live in interesting and complex times, which are felt with full force by our students as they contemplate future prospects and or seek escape from present realities. And it dawned on me as we were talking, as we were kind of preparing for this, that a few of our students, and maybe more than a few, are coming to school to escape the realities of the world that we live in. And I know that for me, that's kind of frustrating for me as an instructor. Why aren't you here to learn? Take them and shake them. But they're here because they feel this pressure, and they're trying to escape. We do well, and I should say I would do well to resist the temptation to stereotype, to assume things about my students, about their situation, about their abilities, about their motivations, or especially to oversimplify. And you know, faculty all talk, we all do this. We say, well, we just ought to take this group of students and do this with them, and then our problems will be solved. Probably not going to work. And then complex issues require creative solutions. It's possible that students themselves have some of the answers if we would but listen. And so one of my goals for this next year is to really listen, not just hear the words, but to really listen to what my students are saying and try to understand their hearts. So we throw out these things for discussion. So questions, comments, we've got some mics. We can circulate some mics. We've got about 15 minutes here. Anybody want to put their 2 cents in or ask something of somebody in the panel? Back there, Steve. Don't be shy. We're the experts.
I deal with virtually all the cases you talk about. I have a problem in terms of administration, if you will, in terms of how we teach, how we go about teaching students and not being told that we have to change something to suit somebody's thing. In other words, somebody doesn't want to take notes. When I went to school, way back when, we took notes because we had to. Not because somebody told us to, but in order to learn it, we had to take notes. I mean, it was just a way of learning. Do we say, to me, that's not an option. I want students to learn, therefore they have to take notes if it's a situation where that's appropriate. In other words, because students aren't taking notes isn't the reason to look at other ways of getting around taking notes. And I think we do a lot of that, trying to get around things and sort of trying to take away the problems of learning. You know, trying to make it easier for them to learn. It's not easy to learn. I mean, and being an art instructor, I don't have to deal with some of the problems because basically they have to sit down and draw a picture. I mean, there's no way around it. They have to do it. But they will figure every way they can to get around it. And, you know, you talk about all the different things, problems, and so forth. And they all have those same problems. You know, oh, gee, I can't come to class. I have drawing students that come to class. Oh, gee, I forgot my pad and pencils. I mean, you come to a drawing class to draw and you don't have your pad and pencils. I mean, we have to encourage our students to grow up, is I think what I'm saying. And I think one of the problems that we have as a society is that we don't encourage our students to grow up. We don't encourage people who watch TV to grow up. Look at the stuff they're watching. It's all about celebrating stupidity. I mean, that's what they're doing. I mean, that's what happens in the movies and stuff. I wouldn't even let my son watch some of those shows because they're just about, oh, let's be stupid, you know? So what I'm saying is, I think we have to be very careful about circumventing the learning process, if you will, to make it easy. Because I think we have to be real cautious about it. That doesn't mean we can't change. That doesn't mean we shouldn't change. Obviously, we have to change. And we have a lot of things that we have to deal with that we didn't have to deal with 10 or 20 or 50 years ago. But let's be careful about that. Is my comment.
No, I agree. Think of an important lesson that you have learned personally. When I think about the most important lessons that I've learned, they've come with a lot of struggle. And what we know is that there has to be challenge. Things that are given aren't retained. They aren't learned. So I think that's good. And the other thing I noticed, Steve, when you were talking, is that students seem to be able to put more creativity and more energy and more work into getting around doing work than they actually do the work. And, you know, redirecting it. Part of it, again, is if we're looking at 18 to 22, 24-year-olds, they're still developing. And one of the things that's really hit me lately is that we're still working with people who are developing, who are growing. And, you know, they don't think like I do. They aren't where I would like them to be. They're where they are. And so my job is to try to help them move to that next level, whatever that next level is.
crossroads in education now, and what I see a lot from my students is I don't think there's a hunger for education, there's a hunger for training. And I teach in Gen Ed, and so what I mostly hear from students is they want to get through my class, you know, without getting much on them, and then get on with their real learning, you know, so they can get onto their career. And I think, you know, I want to hear other people's ideas about that, and then how to get students with that attitude that it's, most of mine, they want to be nurses, and they've never put a Band-Aid on someone, but they're going to be nurses because there's a lot of jobs there. And I don't know, I guess that's just, I'm seeing such a change there about students not really wanting education but training. And the other thing with VA, I'm going to the VA training, I see a lot of guys who aren't, men and women, who aren't physically ready to be in the classroom, and they've signed up for classes, and they say, oh, I have to have brain surgery twice this semester, or this, and I just think, why are you here? I mean, they're physically incapable, so sometimes I get frustrated that it seems to be setting people up for failure to have them in a classroom when they're ill, so ill. So those are
passion for the content that we're teaching. If you can do that, you're going to sell the knowledge to that student. That's one way. Another way is a little bit more practical, and that would be to take the opportunity whenever a class discussion maybe goes in a direction that leads to, well, yeah, I'm just really doing this for training. Stop it. Take that moment and tie what you're teaching that student into what's happening outside that they're after. Okay? What is it that your content is going to help them with when they become a nurse? Help them to make those connections. And I think that's happening a lot in the classrooms right now.
We have a question back here from Lori.
I just want to share with that. I taught intro to psychology to the guys in the mining program, and they didn't want to listen to any of the okay. Because, you know, psychology, what do they need psychology for? They're going to be fixing diesel engines and electrical. I said, well, you guys are going to get a degree when you get out of here, right? I said, yeah. How many of you think you're going to be foremen or supervisors? Everybody says, yeah, we're probably going to be. Well, might it help you to learn how other people think and feel and act? Maybe. Okay, that's what we'll talk about this semester. So I want to reinforce that point, that if you can try to make that connection with students, then that might help too. But I understand the frustration completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a comment for all three that from a wellness standpoint, that, you know, maybe with all the students working so hard in all their classes, I'm going to put a pitch for the music department in the fact that, you know, it's an opportunity to relax, opportunity to do a new skill, opportunity from a very beginning level to either do instrumental or vocal, to take up a guitar class, to take private lessons. I mean, it's a perfect opportunity to kind of relieve some of the stress and so forth. I know that's what I did when I was going through school. I took up the guitar to take away some of the other stresses that you have. So I'm just kind of encouraging advisors and everybody to say, you know, why don't you join a band? Why don't you join a choir? It's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of extra. I mean, we'd like them to practice, yes, but there's not a lot of commitment. You don't have to buy a book, those type of things. So just for what it's worth there.
Well said, and I think the same thing can be said, Scott, for PE, you know. Take a yoga class, go out and run, do something to relieve that stress. Very good.
And it's not just about
they really don't know if they can handle it.
But that's the problem with our classes.
I'm sorry.
This is terrible.
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. Art and music and PE are wonderful classes, and yes, there might be a byproduct of relieving stress. But I don't want to hear this demeaning idea that that's what they're for. We're at an institution, and this is a higher learning educational institution, theoretically. And we're teaching classes that we hope are disseminating information, even in those areas, believe it or not.
Therapy should not be the reason for taking those classes.
Right,
We get people in the classes that are doing just that, and they don't learn anything.
So what's your solution in terms of the people who are working, for example, in student support services? I mean, I know if I see a student has an issue, whether it's, that they're pregnant or whatever.
Don't send them to an art class. Please. That's what we get too many of, and we have real problems with that.
Yeah, most of the students I'm dealing with, they choose programs where they can't pay collectives, and the VA won't pay for certain things. So, that's often not an option.
It should be a rehab program.
So, and it's just with art, we have people taking psychology classes who want to get fixed. We have people in philosophy classes because they want to figure out the answer to life. So I think it's true of everything. We get people taking classes for a number of reasons. Once they step into the classroom, I think as an instructor, my job is to expose them to the best of what's there, whatever that subject matter is, whether it's art or even PE or psychology or whatever it is.
Oh, I was just going to address the issue of wanting training. I teach humanities. Nobody thinks they need my classes. And I just tell them that those who know how work for those who know why.
My students, when I'm advising them, is that it's important to work a balance into your schedule. And so some of like the point that Roy made is a good one. It's important to find a way to work your right brain. And don't expect that it's not going to be work. But it's going to be enriching for you if you do it. So the PE thing, you got to work your bodies, the right brain, the art, the performing arts, studio arts, all those different things. I think it's important to expose our students to those things. Not necessarily for therapeutic reasons, but it's a good thing to recognize that it's going to be beneficial to them.
Comment, a question maybe for the group. I'm wondering if other people are struggling with students who seem to be doing fine in hands-on activities and maybe even writing, but just cannot take those exams. They just seem to be really struggling with test taking, and I'm just wondering what the strategy might be to help those students.
I don't really need a mic. I work with Scott's department doing short-run classes where one set of class, you have to do 3 days and 5 days. Those are the classes. I don't see this as a therapy class because I think we're a life skills class. I've been working with quite a lot of the younger vets that are coming back and getting them back out into a canyon where they're not getting shot at makes them ready to do the other stuff. So I said, when you've got students who are struggling, tell them you don't actually have to sign up for another 6 weeks or something to get a class just to keep going. Go take a short run class, because we've done in 3 days. And one diversion from that, with the career skills, we had a couple of youngsters who came in the classroom for our program who weren't ready in any way, shape or form to do a career, but they had this idea somehow somebody told them they could do this career. Had one guy, I shouldn't complain about it, he was 350 plus pounds, thought he was going to be a firefighter. Nobody had told him he might need to be fit. Right? And we had another kid who didn't know he had to live in a house to be able to get financial aid or have an address to get financial aid. I think little bits like that, sometimes they slip through. You're talking about different groups we deal with. When you have somebody who's so obviously, it shouldn't over in the HPER, well, did anyone tell you you have to climb up a ladder? Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I agree. That's going to happen. You know, it's partly the student's responsibility to research those things, right? And we hold students responsible, like advising is a shared responsibility. We're going to put the information to them. They've got to come and ask for it sometimes. Though.
Right.
Some schools actually require academic advising. We don't, but until like financial aid requirements maybe kick in. Veterans have to if they're using their benefits, so we tie it to some of the money kind of things. I'd also like to respond to your concern. You know, we have some classes that are at the college under the student development department, becoming a master's student, things like that. I don't actually teach those classes. Some of our advisors do. Some of you may teach them. Test anxiety is something that a student is going to, you know, really struggle with, especially early on. So that's maybe one of those cases where you can call in the troops early in the term when you notice a student is really doing poorly on the tests, but their work outside of that testing situation is actually pretty darn good. If you see a discrepancy like that, call the advising officer or go into that Sage link and ask for an advisor to sit down with that student, or you can just call them and ask them to come and sit with you if you feel comfortable talking about it. Certainly, you're the expert in your area.
Okay. Room for just one more response here. And don't forget to sign in your sheet, and just to make sure that we're all on task, our next sessions do begin at 11 o'clock upstairs. So let's just go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to a couple things. One was with the testing thing. In nursing, it culminates a two-year program. Then they have to take a test to get their license. So we really focus on test taking and getting through that. And there's some books that we use that to do that. So there are resources for that. My comment was, is in answer, one of your questions that you brought up was the computer, people working Facebook and things on the computer. I struggled with this last semester particularly because I had students that did that, and I had some that were definitely taking notes and they needed to use the computer because they couldn't write notes for some reason, and so they really used it correctly, but then I had the others that were using the computer to do Facebook, or in fact, one sent the email to somebody during class time, and my counterpart, so you know they weren't doing the right stuff. But the other part to that is I had other students, which is I feel they were adults, and I think if you're going to manage it, it's your own manage. But then I had the other students who were complaining of being distracted by what the other students were doing on the computer. And I didn't know really how to go with that. I mean, I had to put all the computers in the back of the room. But what do you do when you've got both things to do? I don't know if anyone had any.
Well, obviously, you've got a lot of passion around students, which is great to see. There are a lot of questions out there. We're dealing with a very complex issue here. And I would encourage further dialogue. I'd be willing to be a part of groups who wanted to sit down and talk about what do you do with the laptops? What do you do with cell phones? Those kind of things, the problems that we all face. Thank you very much.